It is time for Ask the Mayor on KWBE. 8:31 is our time. Mayor Bob Morgan in with us today. By the way, if you have a question, give us a call at 228-5924. Always welcome questions. I need to pull up the, which I didn't do last week, the computer program in here to see. We don't have one yet, but maybe we'll a little later. Bob, how are you today?
I'm good, Doug. How are you?
Not too bad.
Good.
Did want to start out today, and it's something that was announced this past week, but congratulations to one of your city administration members on a big award that took place last week.
Absolutely. Aaron Sadoff, through the Nebraska Municipal Clerks Association, was the Outstanding Clerk of the Year for first-class cities, so cities of 10,000 and above, and a very well-deserved reward. I mean, she has to try to put up with all us councilmen and mayor, and when agenda time comes around, she works hard to make sure everything's in the right way and everything's worded correctly for maybe amendments and resolutions, and so she's worth her weight in gold, and certainly helps all of us keep in line, and is a very strong asset for the city. And she's been a city employee for a number of years.
Seems like it's some of the work behind the scenes that the public maybe doesn't see. You see the outcome of what elected officials do and the reporting on that or whatever, but there's a lot of work that goes on.
There is, and there's a number of positions that are that way throughout the organization, and it's kind of nice to see at least, people start recognizing the people that do a lot of work in the background.
Congratulations to Erin on her award as Clerk of the Year in Nebraska. Well, you looks like you're headed toward a final vote on the utility terrain vehicle issue, which started out as UTV, ATV, three-wheeler. Then it took out the three-wheeler, and now the council has taken out the ATV part of it. What's your reading on how that will go in early April?
Well, I think, first of all, I guess I kind of like to talk about, in some respects, I think it's really good that the process has worked. I think, when we have routine business like selling properties or replatting or those type of things, we do go through where we suspend the rules on an ordinance, and it's read 3 times and we vote on it tonight or that night. So, in this case, I think there was some, it's new. It's one of those things that you look at that you have to say, well, is it good or is it bad for the city? And I think we've taken a good hard look. At least, we pulled it off and read it for the first time. Then you saw an amendment to make it just UTVs, because there is a significant difference between an ATV and a UTV. Because a UTV, you're at least inside somewhat of a protected cage. Most of them have seat belts, and so there is a little bit more protection with all the other requirements of turn signals and those type of things. And then, I think Councilman Kerr, basically stated that he'd like to see a registration process. And so we'll probably see an amendment again April 3rd. I think the first process is Councilman, with Tim, he basically, he's not against registrations by any form. He's the one that kind of brought this up. It was just that in a year or two, it's probably going to be something that the Nebraska legislature is going to take a look at. And so it's probably one of those things that may be coming anyway. We're not sure. But I think the registration process at least allows some tracking of the UTVs. It allows for, maybe a little easier for enforcement. And maybe it allows, not a bunch of UTVs brought into the city from a group of individuals. So, I think as we continue to refine it, it's starting to get a little more palatable.
Yeah. If it does get final approval and whatever amendments are dealt with added on to it, what's your thought on how prevalent they'll be on city streets? I mean, I have no idea, really. Is there going to be a ton of them out there, or maybe see one once in a while, or what's your reading on that?
I don't think you'll see any more than typically the motorcycles we see.
Yeah.
One of the things that we have to realize, like everything else, it's not a very small purchase. So it's not like you're spending $1,000 to jump into a UTV. I mean, they are expensive, and they're getting more expensive. They size-wise, they're probably comparable to some of the very smallest cars that we have now. So, I'm not sure. Some safeguards you do see, at least in the ordinances, that, their maximum speed in the city is 30 miles an hour. And I think some people were concerned about noise, which is a valid concern, but they only can operate from sun up to sundown. So there are a couple of restrictions, but I see it probably more like motorcycles. I don't know. I mean, we'll kind of see if it does pass.
One thing that came up, the addition of the city regulation to allow them on 136 from Center Street to get across the bridge there on West Court. You know, some might ask, well, why not the same on the US 77 highway bridge in the south then, to kind of connect those two areas? Or was that basically a state restriction regarding public access highway where you couldn't do that? Was that it?
That's really where it fell. There's a map that shows, you know, what is considered from a state perspective, what do we have more control of from the city perspective, and so Highway 77 was ruled out from, you know, the state laws.
Some of the discussion regarding safety got kind of deep into the weeds, and I know one of the discussions was on the type of tires these vehicles they use and whether they're appropriate for, you know, hard surface streets, whether they be concrete, asphalt, or whatever. Did you have any concern about that, or is that maybe getting a little too deep into it? I mean, you know, actually the safety part of it is kind of on the driver themselves, isn't it? Really?
I think the safety part is, tires are kind of unique depending on what vehicle you drive. I mean, yes, I think there could be some concerns, but then I think about, you know, back in the younger years when my son and I would go, we both had Jeeps, and we would go to off-road park. You know, those tires were pretty knobby because they had the grip. You know, I think they probably were maybe not quite as safe as what you have on, you know, my truck today. But again, I think when you think about it at 30 miles an hour, I think that takes a lot of the safety concern out of the tire issue.
One of the things I just sitting there listening to the discussion over the several times, I think you had at least 3 rounds of discussion since this started. One of the things that was kind of difficult to get a lock on was how many people were opposed to it, how many were for it, because you saw some of the same people showing up each time who had adamant opinions on it one way or the other. And when you have a situation like that, you're kind of trying to gauge, well, are that many people really opposed to it, or is it a small group, or any thoughts on that as far as how the public generally came down on sort of a larger population basis?
You know, I think that's the hard part. I mean, we did see, and you know, first, I'd really like to thank the people that talked on the public for questions about this during the public, because if you think about it, several of them did really some pretty strong research.
Yeah,
and it wasn't just,
they called around and looked at
other cities. You know, it wasn't just, well, I don't like them, I don't want them, they're not safe. No, they went out and did research, and they found out what North Platte did and what Nebraska City did and what Columbus did. We'd had some of that research, but, you know, hats off to whether it was for or against. I was very pleased at the number of people that spoke from an educated standpoint. And so they did educate themselves.
Must be a lot of use of these vehicles already in Nebraska, because a lot of communities have been cited as to what they have or their experiences on these vehicles.
You know, and there is, and, you know, I had to kind of think through the process. And, you know, your question about how do you know if there's people for it or against it, you know, I had probably more people that weren't really, you know, for it than I did against it. But when you think about it, it's like 50 or 60 people that have reached out to me across the number of 3 or 4 weeks, and we have 12,500, you know, people in the city. How do you equate that?
Yeah.
And so that's the hard part for myself, and not only that myself, but the council people. You know, I think it's like everything else. You know, I personally don't own a UTV, and I'm probably in an age bracket that has a different opinion than people that are younger than me. And so you also have to think about that too as you look through the vote.
Yeah.
You know, is it just that I'm stuck in my ways? Am I worried about safety? Or, you know, is this a point in time where, you know, this is something that's going to continue to be popular from individuals that see that as their value point, just like maybe, I don't know. I mean, I'm not old enough, thank goodness, to know what the whole conversation on motorcycles were at that point in time. But, you know, I think from that point there was a lot to think about, and we'll see how April 3rd rolls around and looks at.
One last question on this topic before we take a break here. The planned, or at least what he says, Councilman Kerr said on the registration amendment he's going to offer, wouldn't it just be better to wait for the legislature to address that issue, or do you have any thoughts on that? as far as?
Well, I have two thoughts. Number one, I think the legislature will address it, and that's really why, Councilman Fralin says, hey, maybe we should just wait. And I think in thinking it through further that, if there are some questions that came up about enforcement, if you don't have that sticker on there and somebody's, doing something they shouldn't do, or they're driving it at night, it's kind of like a license plate. So I think it's a little easier to identify that four-wheel or that UTV, and then, you can follow up the next day if you happen to, it just has to be a quick glance and then they're gone.
We'll be back with more on Ask the Mayor with Mayor Bob Morgan in just a moment on KWBE. You're listening to Ask the Mayor with Mayor Bob Morgan today on KWBE. Have a meeting coming up. It's actually kind of a dual thing. You have a work session Monday night, which is the 27th, if I'm looking at the calendar here. But you also have an open house meeting on the Court Street project, and that's going to be at the Municipal Auditorium.
That is correct. The engineering firm is going to set up in the City Auditorium from 4 to 6 p.m. It's an open house. Come and you go. It's very similar for those that attended the Lincoln Street project, and that was attended very well. So it's really the kickoff to get input from the community for at least the first kickoff meeting, and then at the end they'll share their 2 or 3 or 4 ideas, probably August to September-ish. But the main focus of this is going to be, okay, so if we move the highway 136 over a block and we take the truck traffic off of Court Street, what do we want Court Street corridor to look like? Because that really kind of opens it up into a new look and feel. And so that is an opportunity, what opportunity does that open us up for, depending on how it looks? What opportunities does that open us up for, additional businesses downtown? I mean, one of the comments throughout the campaign, no matter whether it was a council individual or a mayor, was really how do we want to see the downtown revitalized. This is something that doesn't happen overnight, but this is a really good step to say, what do we want that downtown to look like? And if you look across the country, there's a number of cities that have really battled the same thing we have, and they each have some unique features that I'm pretty sure, like our engineers, that firm is thinking about some unique individual opportunities for Beatrice as you look down Court Street. I mean, you can roll into a town like Pueblo, Colorado, where they have a little more advantage because they had a river going down through there, and they were able to utilize the river as part of their asset. We're not that far off, but I think a reroute of the river might be a little bit more costly and a little harder to do. But again, the idea is the same: is to build, really, in a lot of respects, a place that people feel very comfortable and open walking and shopping and entertainment. And so, as you look at the downtown, it's an asset that needs to be improved. And so to do that, we need to make sure we take step one and plan that in a meaning, purposeful way, and then we move forward on attacking how we get it done.
Back when it was first discussed about the potential of moving the truck traffic south to Market Street, and at that time it didn't really get a lot of support, but it seemed like the two break-off points are at 2nd Street and also 8th Street, where they would move off the highway there. Do you sense that's still the best? Those are the two best locations?
I think it does. I think that's still the two best locations, because in that, and when you talk about Court Street, you also have to take a look at a block or two over and a block or two over to the north and to the south. There's a lot of business potential there. And you got some anchors almost already there. I know you have the rail, but you also have Stone Hollow Brewery, which is a good anchor point. And then as you move up there, you've got stores that really kind of line all the way up through Valentino's. So I think there's some strong anchor points that we can work with. Again, it's going to be, and I know it's a joint effort, and I think Main Street already is up for the challenge, will be business recruitment. Main Street has done a good job trying to focus on how to really improve the downtown, and so they're going to be a vital player in this as well.
Several years ago, a firm, I think it was RDG out of Omaha, if I remember right, did a study of, things that you could do to make the downtown more pedestrian friendly, more, marketable, get people to come there. And that study kind of sat on the shelf. I still remember seeing once in a while the easel with their recommendations on there. Are any of those that were in that study, do you think, still potentially viable today? I don't know how much you had looked at that, or maybe there are elements or components of that plan that would still work.
I think when I first got on the council, that was about that time frame. That was, I think, probably around 2014-ish. I think there's still some ideas there. I really do. We have all that history. I think this might be the third time we've studied the reroute of 136. And I think, some times have changed. And like I said, there was kind of renewal in this project. But it's always nice to have that history because, we have that because, we paid for those studies. And one of the things that is my hope is that this is not just a study. This is a way to move this project forward, whether it's in the next 2 years or 6 years or 10 years. But, it is a way to move the downtown forward because that's one of the things that is going to attract more people to the city. And there are some things we need downtown.
So, citizens, if you have some good ideas, March 27th, 4 to 6 p.m. at the Municipal Auditorium on Court Street.
Absolutely.
Somebody might have a brilliant idea out there nobody's thought about. You never know.
You know what? That's exactly right. Yeah. So please come down, talk with, whoever's there. I know that our city administrator will be there. I will be there. Not as an expert, but at least to listen, because I think it's important to show our support for the study.
We'll be back to wrap up Ask the Mayor with Mayor Bob Morgan in just a moment. Back on Ask the Mayor today with Beatrice Mayor Bob Morgan. Have a few things left to finish up today. Have a little bit of work going on near the South 77 River Bridge at the edge of Chautauqua Park. There's a trail section where, for people that have taken that under the bridge, you get about so far, and all of a sudden you take a sharp right there. You're having a little project underway to sort of fix that there.
We are. You'll see, and actually, when I drove by today, they're working on it today. Yeah. They're working on the bike trail there, and they're working on the curves there to eliminate the hard 90-degree turn and make it a little more gradual turn. So it's just another way to enhance the trail that we have there, and it makes a lot of sense.
I wasn't clear the vehicle lane there that exists there that comes out of the park there. Is that going to remain, or is that? I wasn't sure if that was or not.
And that I don't know. We'll have to see.
Because I know that you go into that parking area, and then there's two ways out of Chautauqua there. I didn't know if they were going to keep that or not.
I mean, so. I would guess they are.
Yeah.
Okay. If you look at the dotted lines on the plan, I think they probably would. But again, those are the weeds that I'm not involved in.
Yeah. Leave that up to the day-to-day people that handle those
that know what they're doing. You don't see them asking me to drive the Bobcat.
You're not going to wear the vest or the hard hat or anything?
Oh, I'd like to, but I think I would their productivity would drop off.
Well, we talked about open houses. There's actually another one coming up in early April, and that is a project that you talked about several months ago when you were on the council, and that was the possibility of a trail connection that would extend from Riverside Park and hook up with the Homestead National Historical Park eventually. I think at one time you were looking at 2 or 3 different options, what side of highway. There were differences in cost. Is it down to kind of one concept now, or how do you see it?
I really think it is. I think we've kind of identified the path that we want. And, I might just add that this is a very important open house because this shows the interest that Beatrice residents have in this project. And, when you think about it, we're probably one of the few first-class cities that have the trail systems we have. And we also have a national park that sits, 4 miles outside of Beatrice, and what a gem it is for a community to have a national park that close. And so, as you see more and more people utilizing transportation as bikes, and the number of people that walk and, enjoy our parks, this is just a very natural fit to be able to ride your bike out to Homestead National Park. And so, I think, again, we're trying to leverage a true gem that we have in Gage County and appreciate them. And so I would encourage people to go take a look at what the trail is proposed to look like, and more importantly, express their their support for this project, because with anything, this was probably some help that we would get from the federal government. Building a trail takes a long time, but on the other side of the coin, they say, well, how's the community feel about it?
Yeah.
And the more people we have in support to come out to this open house from 4 to 6 on April 4th, the better we look when it says funding time.
Mm-hmm. There's a map that shows the path on the city's Facebook page, and the neat thing about it is, even using the south side of the highway, I think there's only one highway crossing, and that would be coming off of River Road, which is west of Riverside Park, and then you would cross there and then get onto the trail, which follows all the way out.
Right, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Again, safety always comes into play, and I'm sure they really took that into consideration. So, yes, please come to that. Actually, please come to both forums because we would love public input. I think, if nothing else, the UTVs have showed that, coming together as a community with ideas, no matter what side you're on, really helps us refine what we do.
I was thinking about just visualizing that trail if it were there. You have the bridge that goes across the creek there when you get past the curve.
Yes.
And I'm sure you have another residence or two where might be kind of a close fit in there trying to get right of way through there. Would those be problems at all with this alternative, or do you see that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think, those are just things that you do work out as you build any trail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As a landowner, you always have some concerns. But again, that's one of the things that we have to, at least negotiate.
Yeah. Well, that open house is coming up April 4th, and again, that's a 4 to 6 p.m. thing. And again, it's at the city auditorium, so getting
exactly.
good use of the municipal auditorium.
Absolutely.
Other than Mudecas and leagues and things like that.
That's
with
right.
The floors. So,
that's right.
Maybe just a quick closing remark or two today about you continued your program Monday night about having department heads come by and give an overview. Since you have new members on the council and you have people that I'm sure are familiar with those departments, but maybe not to an in-depth way. You had the police department do theirs Monday night, gave some figures on what happened this past year in terms of arrests and calls and things like that. I was struck by how many divisions and areas of emphasis there are for the police department. It's not just going out on road patrol. There's a lot of moving parts to the department.
There really is. I think Chief Hickman has done a good job moving into a pretty large-sized police department that you don't think about. And, he's got a lot of good experiences, but when we think about it, we do have the road crew. We also have, some investigative people. And, you have the SROs, or the school resource officers. And then, having the whole 911 call center is a pretty big job.
Yeah.
And he did a great job on his report with his statistics, but also highlighting what, he has some great people underneath him. I think I think one of the things that shows, and I think we're always proud to see as a council and the mayor, is the whole segment on the community outreach. With taking a child or a student to lunch. I think there was a fishing opportunity to fish with the police officers, and then both, I think the county sheriff's department and the police department do a good job of really trying to make sure underprivileged children are taken care of around Christmas time. And so, there are a lot of highlights that they do more than just pulling somebody over for speeding. It really shown through that, especially like in the, we've had the school resource officers for a number of years, but quite honestly, they're starting to see the fruits of their labor with just being able to build a strong relationship with these young youth that, have to make a choice. All the youth have to make a choice of rights and wrongs, and I think they do a good job of helping guide them down the right path.
Have a big crime victims program, too, which I think, if I remember right, deals somewhere with around 600 to 800 crime victim services in a given year, which is a pretty extensive thing in and of itself. And it's done with 2 people, basically.
That is correct, but they are wonderful and provide the support that victims need.
Yeah. And trying to think, there was one other. Working with juveniles too. I know one of the officers is a juvenile services officer, because they have those cases too where you don't throw young people in jail. There are other options that you can do to get to those cases, and
Right.
so that's part of it too. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, I noticed in the report the other day, I think the chief made mention of 16 sworn officers. I think, is that a little bit lower than it was before? I was thinking there used to be 20, 21, 22 in the department. I don't know if that's a
I'm not
change or
that
nothing.
I don't know. I do know
Okay.
we're down one officer,
Yeah.
and we're actively recruiting for that one officer. But when you think about it, we have really a very strong asset in the community with our police force. I think they've done a really good job of, not only getting to know everybody in the community, but also supporting the laws that they're vested to support.
All right. Mayor, thanks for being with us again.
Well, thank you.